The cost of control, policing prostitution in America. It's been called the oldest profession in the world, but in most parts of the United States, prostitution is still illegal, criminalized, stigmatized, and policed more heavily than many violent crimes. And yet, across the screen in pornography, the same acts are legal and profitable. So how do we make sense of this contradiction? This video explores the landscape of prostitution laws globally in the United States, the intense policing of sex work, and what these laws really say about government control, morality, and misplaced priorities. First, let's look at where prostitution is illegal. Let's look at the global picture. Prostitution, defined as the exchange of sexual services for money, is legal, regulated, or decriminalized in many countries. In Germany, sex work is legal, taxed, and regulated. In New Zealand, it's decriminalized. Sex workers can operate freely, access healthcare, and even unionize. In the Netherlands, legal brothels are part of the tourism economy, especially in Amsterdam's red light district. You've heard of it. But there is no global consensus. Some countries like Sweden and Norway take a Nordic model approach, criminalizing the buyer, not the seller, in hopes of ending demand without punishing sex workers. Others, like most parts of the Middle East, criminalize both parties, often with severe penalties. So where does the US fall on this map? In the United States, prostitution is mostly illegal. One major exception is Nevada, but even there it's complicated. Only 10 of Nevada's 17 counties allows licensed brothels, and it's banned in major cities like Las Vegas and Reno. Legal sex work in these counties operate under strict rules, regular STD testing, background checks, and heavy taxation. Outside of that, every state except Rhode Island for a brief period between 2003 and 2009 criminalizing some or all aspects of sex work, especially street prostitution, solicitation, and pimping. Porn, however, where sex is also exchanged for money, is completely illegal, protected under the First Amendment rights, as long as it's filmed, produced, and labeled as performative. This inconsistency reveals something deeper. It's not about the act of sex for money that's criminal. It's how and where it can happen, and who gets the profit. Should the government be able to tell us when, where, and who we can have sex with? So why is prostitution illegal in the first place? Supporters of criminalization often cite morality, public health, and trafficking concerns. But the real answer may be older and more ideological. Laws governing sex work in the United States gained traction in the early 1900s, during the Progressive Era, alongside efforts to police alcohol, drugs, gambling, and vagrancy. The assumption, vice destroys the moral fabric of society. In reality, sex work has long existed, but under the covers. But laws began targeting the poor, migrants, and women of color most aggressively. And these laws persist not necessarily because they work, but because they serve certain societal functions, reinforcing gender norms, controlling public space, policing poverty. What right then does the government have to control a consensual act between adults, especially when it profits from pornography, which in some cases is nearly indistinguishable? If you want to understand how seriously America takes the policing of prostitution, just follow the money. Hundreds of millions of dollars are spent each year on undercover sting operations, surveillance of websites like Craigslist, Blackpage before it was shut down, and now niche forums or encrypted platforms, fake escort ads posted by police departments, task force focusing on trafficking and vice crimes. Most of these efforts don't just target traffickers, they target buyers or Johns through reverse stings, where undercover officers pose as sex workers. Others focus on the workers themselves, especially street level sex workers who are disproportionately arrested, harassed, and charged. Punishments vary by state, but penalties can include misdemeanor charges, fines, jail time, mandatory registration as a sex offender. Cities like Phoenix, Atlanta, and Miami have specialized vice squads. Others have John schools, diversion programs designed to shame and rehabilitate buyers. Anti-trafficking efforts are often used as a cover, even when little or no coercion is present. The result? A system where consensual adult sex is criminalized under the banner of protecting people. What about eradicating actual sex crime like childhood molestation or the rape of women and men, and passing down sentences that actually reflect the seriousness of the crime, the trauma that lives with the victim? So, what's wrong with this picture? Critics argue that policing sex work pushes it underground, making it more dangerous. Resources could be better spent addressing actual trafficking, poverty, addiction, and housing inability. Arresting sex workers often leads to a cycle of free incarceration with few exit options. And perhaps most importantly, policing does not end sex work. It just relocates it from streets to streets, or from the streets to screens, from visible to invisible, from manageable to marginalized. Legalizing or decriminalizing sex work would allow safer working conditions, access to legal protection, medical care, and workers' rights. Even police departments often admit that prostitution arrests do little to reduce demand or protect anyone. So why keep doing it? Again, it's supply and demand. The heavy policing of prostitution doesn't happen in a vacuum. It shares a history with the war on drugs and broken windows policing, the idea that small crimes create disorder and must be stomped out. Like drug users, sex workers become targets in a broader war on urban decay. Policing here becomes about more than just law. It becomes a tool of social control, control over gender and sexuality, control over public space, control over the bodies of the poor and marginalized people. Whether it's moral panic, political grandstanding, or bureaucratic inertia, the reason prostitution is policed so hard often have little to do with actual harm. They have everything to do with power. Prostitution isn't going away. It never has. What's at stake isn't whether it exists, but how we respond. Do we keep pouring millions into criminalization, or do we build a system that centers safety, consent, and dignity? The real question isn't about sex. It's about control, and whose bodies are deemed punishable just for surviving. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful or provocative, leave your thoughts below. Should prostitution be decriminalized in the US? Why or why not? I leave with this final thought too. If a construction worker can sell his body, in a sense, sell his labor, why can't a woman as a sex worker?